Good morning, everyone. The hearing will be starting very shortly, so please take your places. The hearing will be under level 2 all day today. The public gallery will be closed. Only a few accredited journalists will be allowed into the hearing room whilst evidence is being given at level 2. Everyone else will be able to view the proceedings in the annex, subject to the 10-minute delay. No one, whether a member of a legal team, an accredited journalist, or members of the inquiry staff or contractors will be permitted to bring an electronic device into the hearing room. This includes mobile phones, smartwatches, earbuds and vapes. Although this message is stated regularly, it is very important to not be complacent. So please do check your pockets and bags now for any devices. The inquiry security team will be able to arrange safe storage of any such devices during level 2 hearings. Please ask at the security desk. And please remember to allow sufficient time to arrange safe storage of your devices before the start of proceedings. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. O'Connor.
So this morning, Commander Murphy returns to give a further section of evidence.
Quite.
Commander Murphy, thank you for returning to the witness box. You are, of course, still under oath.
Good morning. Yes.
And you will be giving evidence today and also tomorrow about the counter-terrorism police investigation into the responsibility for the Skripal poisoning.
Yes, correct.
And as we've seen, and we'll come back to in a moment, that was the subject, was it not, of Operation Caterva?
It was.
Before we talk a little more about that operation, is it right that some of the detail of the way in which that investigation was undertaken and also some of its findings are covered by restriction orders that have been made by the Chair?
Yes, that's correct.
And is it then the case that for some of the issues that we cover, you may only be able to give a high-level answer in open, or in fact you may indicate that you can't answer in open at all?
Correct, yes.
And that will be to ensure that you don't breach a restriction order that the Chair has made?
Yes.
And as we have observed previously, where that happens, you will return in the closed evidence sessions of the inquiry and give the evidence there that you can't give here.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. If we could please have up on screen INQ 006136. This is the organogram that we looked at yesterday, Commander Murphy.
Yes.
And we see from the very bottom entry of that organogram that as of now, you are responsible for all three of the investigations conducted by counter-terrorism police.
Yes, I am.
And that no doubt goes some of the way to explaining why you keep
I'm here.
coming
Yes.
into the witness box.
Yes, sorry about that.
And I think it's right to say that most of the evidence, in fact, probably all of the evidence that you have given to the inquiry so far has concerned, first of all, Operation Wadana.
Yes.
That is the overt investigation into Skripal poisoning.
Yes.
And so you've given various evidence about the searches of the house and public safety matters and so on. So that's the box on the left-hand side. And then also about Operation Reed, which was the sort of equivalent operation into Dawn Sturgess and Charlie Rowley's poisoning.
Yes, that's correct.
What we are concerned with today, as I've said, is the middle box, Operation Caterva.
Yes.
And that, in fact, was the only one of these three operations for which you were the SIO at the time.
Correct.
Now, we've heard Caterva described as a covert investigation. Can you just give us some idea, in practical terms, what that meant?
Yes, absolutely. So different to the other two investigations, which were what we would term reactive investigations, so responding to an incident and all of the inquiries that come from it. This was a proactive covert investigation that, in essence, worked with partners to conduct covert inquiries to try and identify the subjects who might be responsible for the poisoning and subsequently the depositing of Novichok in Salisbury. And that investigation ran in parallel to Operation Wadana.
You say it worked in parallel to Operation Wadana, and you touched on this yesterday, but was it in fact the case that those involved in Operation Wadana were to a large extent excluded from the work that you and your colleagues were doing on Operation Caterva?
Yes, that's correct. So Operation Caterva, I mean, we have talked about this previously in some of my evidence, but in counter-terrorism investigations, they often run at secret, as we discussed with Government Protective Marking Scheme. Operation Caterva ran at a higher grade of security, so at top secret, and involved a need-to-know basis. So a small team based on need-to-know, and I kept that a very tight team throughout this investigation.
So, for example, I think we did touch on this yesterday, people like Mr. Asman may have had little or no understanding of what was going on with your investigation at the same time.
Yes, there would have been some people like Mr. Asman who had some knowledge there was an investigation, but not the content of it and its progress.
But perhaps it's important just to go back to one other point you made yesterday, which is that the SIO of Operation Wadana, that is VN 012,
Yes.
to whom you were a critical friend, was that individual kept apprised of Operation Caterva?
Yes, so whilst it was need to know, it wasn't run in isolation, and I think a really important distinction to make. So VN 12 was kept up to date with all the developments and saw all of the information and inquiries that we were conducting within Operation Caterva. And of course, DCS Barnes, as PIP 4, sat above all of those operations, so was able to provide that strategic oversight of our investigations.
Yeah. You mentioned a moment ago, and it's referred to in the police report, that Operation Caterva worked with partners. In terms of domestic partners, are you able to give us a bit more idea of who they were?
Well, certainly, like a lot of our work, our main partner in this investigation was MI5, but that doesn't necessarily mean they were the only partner here. So the intelligence community more broadly, of course, other police forces and services, and of course we worked with an awful lot of private industry and others to gather evidence and information to support our inquiry, as any police investigation would.
Yes. We will come in the course of the morning to see, in terms of international work, requests were made to overseas police forces, particularly the Dutch authorities. We'll see that. Is that an unusual aspect of an investigation like this?
Not especially so, but particularly not in a case like this. We frequently would engage with international partners, both in policing and on occasion intelligence partners from overseas as well, and we did that in this case.
Now, we started with the straightforward proposition that the purpose of Operation Caterva was to attempt to identify where responsibility for the Skripal poisoning lay.
Yes.
Did it succeed in that objective?
Yes, as a result of this investigation, we were able to identify 3 individuals referred to here as Petrov, Bosharov and Fedotov, and ultimately gained sufficient amounts of information to work with the Crown Prosecution Service to secure charges for all 3 of those individuals for their involvement in the events in Salisbury, particularly in the first incidents, but at this stage, whilst it's an ongoing investigation, not charges specifically relating to Dawn and Charlie.
So you mentioned the 3 individuals who, of course, we will hear a lot more of in the
Yes.
course of the next day or so, Bosharov, Petrov and Fedotov. We'll come to the charges, but you rather coyly said that there were charges in relation to their involvement in the Skripal poisoning. Can you be a bit clearer about the conclusions you reached about, in summary, what that involvement was?
Yes, that all 3 of them were jointly involved, whilst 2 of them, Petrov and Bosharov, attended Salisbury, and it is, according to our case at least, applied poison to the front door of Sergei and Yulia's home address and subsequently deposited Novichok in Salisbury. So they have been charged in relation to the offence in Sergei's case, in Yulia's case, and of course in Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey's case, and for a chemical weapons offence linked to their use of Novichok.
Yes, the offence, we'll see, but the offence with which they've been charged is attempted murder.
Yes, correct.
So that covers, obviously in the shortest summary, your conclusions about their involvement on that day. Were you also able to discover information about their background, their membership of organisations, and so on?
Yes, one of the core objectives of this investigation was to discover they travelled as Petrov, Bosharov and Fedotov, was to discover who they really are and try to link them into any kind of formal organisation. And the investigation was able to demonstrate that they were members of a Russian military intelligence unit known as the GRU, particularly of one unit within the GRU called 29155. Excuse me, and that it was within that role that they undertook this this incident.
And beyond that, did your investigation reveal information related not just to what you understood to be their involvement in this particular episode, but about activity more generally?
Yes, we were able to demonstrate that variously and together they have been involved in a number of incidents in different parts of the world that we say are combined with that activity on behalf of the GRU.
And if we could go to the police report, please. So it's INQ 005820, page 9. Paragraph 23, Commander Murphy, you refer to what you've just told us about the GRU, and at paragraph 24, you say, in summary, the evidence shows that all 3 belong to GRU Unit 29155
Yes.
and have worked together on operations across Europe for a number of years.
Correct.
Is that a summary of what you regard as your findings?
It is.
We will, of course, go to the evidence that underpins that, but that is, as it were, where you feel the investigation led you.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like just to ask you a few questions about the chronology of Operation Katerva. And to do that, I wonder if we could stay with the police report but go back to the page before. So could we go back to page 8, please? And look at paragraph 20. Thank you. I'm not going to read this out, Commander Murphy, but of course we know the starting point being March, the Skripal poisoning itself.
Yes.
And then we can see that by the 26th of June, so three and a half months later, evidence was submitted to the CPS by
Yes.
Operation Katerva seeking charges in respect of 2 suspects. Which 2 suspects?
Petrov and Bosharov initially.
In respect of the attack on the Skripals.
Yes.
And then it was a month or so later, we see here the 19th of July, that the CPS authorised charges.
Yes.
And you've described those charges, but we can see they're set out there, conspiracy to murder, attempted murder and so on.
Yes.
And then there was a period after the CPS authorised those charges, but before they were announced publicly. Can you say something about that?
Yes, so during that period of time, because we knew from our work on Petrov and Bosherov that they had travelled regularly, it was my intent to secure those charges on a need-to-know basis to hopefully take every opportunity to arrest Petrov and Bosherov if they travelled again. At some point in the future, as you'll see in this paragraph, by the 5th of September, it was decided that was not likely to be the case, and so a public announcement was made relating to the charges.
Right. Yes, so we pick it up, as you say, on the 5th of September. We will come to that later on,
Yes.
Possibly tomorrow, the announcement of the charges on the 5th of September. It was a week or so after that, was it not, on the 13th, so actually a little more than a week, that another event took place, which was an interview on Russian television that, in fact, given by Petrov and Bosherov.
Yes, that's correct. So after our 5th of September press statement, a short period later, as you describe, both Petrov and Bosherov went on to the Russia Today programme and were interviewed about their visit to Salisbury.
And that was no coincidence, was it? We looked at it at some of that interview.
Yes.
In Salisbury, when we were in Salisbury, we will look at it again. But when we do, we will see that they refer frequently to the announcement that had happened a week or so before, and some of the CCTV stills that had been released on that occasion.
Yes, during the announcement, we released a small number of CCTV pictures to demonstrate the two individuals that were, we say, are Petrov and Bosherov. And they responded in that interview saying, basically admitting it was them in the photographs, but providing a different explanation for their visit to Salisbury.
Yes, and of course we will come to that. Just going back to the chronology, within a day or so of the Russia Today interview, so the 13th of September, is it right that there started what became quite a lengthy sequence of articles published by the organisation Bellingcat relating to these incidents?
Yes, that's correct.
And they were, of course, a well-established organisation before that, and they'd published other articles relating to Russian activity. But
Yes.
we will see, will we not, that there were a series of articles, in fact, related to this incident and to Petrov and Bosherov.
Yes, over a prolonged period, in fact, Petrov and Bosherov, and later as well, articles relating to Fedotov and other parts of the GRU.
Yes. Thank you. And then just going back to the chronology, we don't need to go back to the police report, but it was some time later, wasn't it? In fact, in April 2021,
Yes.
that the CPS made a charging decision in respect of the third individual, Fedotov.
Yes, that's correct.
And that decision was announced in September 2021.
Yes, in September 2021, after the charging decision earlier in the year on Sergei Fedotov, we made the announcement, and it's at that point that we also confirmed publicly that we had subsequently identified Petrov, Bosherov and Fedotov in their real names and their association to the GRU.
Yes, and that issue, we'll come to the aliases,
Yes.
but that was something, just so we all have it in mind, that Bellingcat had been publishing about in the meantime, had they?
Correct.
So, Commander Murphy, that is a sort of basic outline of Caterva and some of the key points along the way. Is it right that beyond that, details of exactly what Operation Caterva did, what was known at certain times, developments in the investigation, all that type of information is sensitive, is covered by the Chair's restriction orders, and so we will not get into the same sort of discussion here as we have with Operation Wadana about the way in which the investigation developed?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to come back again, just really by way of introduction, to Bellingcat. We've mentioned it already. Can you just summarise for us what that organisation is all about, and in particular, in a little more detail than we have so far, what it did in this case?
reading their website, Bellingcat consider themselves to be citizen journalists, really. So these are individuals that conduct investigations and then publish those reports within the Bellingcat website. And at different times, they publish different stories from all over the world that tend to focus on significant world events, conflict and or terrorism incidents or national security incidents. And in this case, from the start of Salisbury, Bellingcat obviously were publishing various bits of information relating to their own inquiries. And it's probably fair to say that they reached the similar conclusions as Operation Caterva in the investigation. Now, the way they did that was very different to the way we did it, clearly, and we have very strict evidence rules in terms of how we do that. But of course, as a journalistic agency, they did something very different, but they ultimately reached a similar conclusion to us.
And does it follow from what you've described? Is it fair to say that, in effect, Bellingcat were conducting a parallel open source investigation to the Operation Caterva investigation?
Yes, I think that would be a very fair description of what they were doing.
If we could go to the police report, please, so INQ 005820, page 58, and look at paragraph 182. This is to pick up what we've just been discussing, Commander Murphy. You say there that reports have been published notably by Bellingcat, a media group, as you've explained, which publishes the findings of citizen journalists' investigations, which demonstrate the real identities of the suspects and their links to the GRU. And then you add, and is this still your position, that you assess that this reporting is consistent with your own investigation and appears reliable?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
And we see there's a footnote there. Could we just go down and look at footnote 366, please? You make this point. You say that that's not to say that CTP relied on the same material or methods as Bellingcat. Similar conclusions may be reached by different means, and you can't comment on Bellingcat's methodology.
Yes, that's correct. And I think it's important to say at this point as well that in any investigation, particularly those conducted in the modern age, the content of online material can, of course, be of value to us. But its probative value is sometimes called into question, and clearly it helps contribute to the wider picture. So some of the material later published by Bellingcat, but other media agencies, and forms part of our overall picture, but clearly is a small part of that, and is part of our normal investigative activity.
Yes. I mean, just because material is available on the internet, it doesn't mean that it's not useful to you.
Yes, and it's not always clearly accurate, but on occasion we need to understand what's out there in publicly published on the internet and understand its relevance to our investigation.
And as we will see, some of the material that Bellingcat published and made something of, you also regard as being important in the context of this case.
Yes, absolutely.
And were there occasions where Bellingcat published material in articles which drew your attention to information, useful open source material?
Yes, absolutely. They pointed at open source material that was both of use to us and more broadly our investigation.
We just note the last sentence of that footnote. We may come to this in more detail, but is it right? Is it fair to say that some of the investigative steps that Bellingcat took were steps that weren't open to you?
Yes, I believe that to be the case. Yes, whilst I'm not entirely familiar with how they go about conducting their inquiries, we have very strict rules about how we do that, and so I'm sure they follow a different route to us.
I mean, I don't think there's any mystery about this. If, for example, they contacted someone on the internet and paid to obtain some material, that may be something that wasn't open to you to do.
Precisely.
But as we say, and finally on this, I think you've made this clear, in broad terms, were the findings and the conclusions that Bellingcat published essentially similar to the ones that you ended up with?
Yes.
Let me just come to a slightly separate point, which we have already mentioned in passing. And to do this, could we go to the graphics pack, please, and to INQ 005819, page 6. So Commander Murphy, we have referred already to Petrov, Bosharov and Fedotov. You've referred to the charges brought against them. And it's right, isn't it, that the charges that we've seen were made were brought against them in those names?
That's correct, yes.
But as you have also mentioned, one of the conclusions of Operation Caterva was that those are not their true names.
Yes, that's correct. We believe there are alias names linked to their operational activity.
And in fact, the true names, first of all, the true name of Alexander Petrov is Alexander Mishkin.
Correct.
The true name of Ruslan Bosharov you believe to be Anatoly Chapiga.
Correct.
And of Sergei Fedotov to be Denis Sergeyev.
Correct.
But as I indicated, I think in my opening, and consistently with, for example, the police report, we will refer during the course of these hearings and your evidence today and tomorrow to those individuals by what you believe to be the alias names that we see in front of us.
Yes, so these were the names they were operating under throughout the incident, so these are the names that we will refer to them, and charges are secured in these names.
Petrov, Bosharov, Fedotov, those are the names in which they travelled, are they?
They are, sir, yes.
Okay.
So, Commander Murphy, that's all of the introductory points I wanted to ask you about. What I'm going to do now is take you through the movements of those three men between the 2nd and 4th of March 2018.
Yes.
That will probably take us most of the rest of the day.
Thank you.
After that, we will look at, as I've said, the Russian Today interview and your reaction to that. And we will also then go on and look at the fruits of Operation Caterva in terms of the true identities of these men, their membership of the GRU,
Yes.
their other activities and so on. All right?
Thank you.
So, starting with the 2nd of March, Friday, it's right to say, isn't it, that all three of those men whose faces we were just looking at arrived in London by air on Friday the 2nd of March.
They did, yes.
Fedotov arrived on a flight from Moscow which landed at Heathrow.
Correct?
And Bosharov and Petrov arrived together on a later flight, also from Moscow, to Gatwick.
They did.
Now, all three of them, being Russian citizens, needed visas to enter the UK.
Yes, that's correct.
And is it right that all three of them at that time, that is March 2018, held current UK visas?
Yes.
And I think we will see from the documents that they had in fact held a series, each of them had held more than one UK visa at that time.
Yes, they had.
Sequentially.
Yes, correct. They had been here previously.
And in the case of each of them, the visas that they held in 2018 had been applied for and granted the year before, in 2017.
Yes, towards the end of 2017.
So I'm going to ask you to look at each of them, the visa application forms in turn. I mean, before I do so, let me ask you, were these visa application forms at least one of the points of reference for Operation Caterva?
Yes, absolutely. They were one of the first points of reference for Caterva.
So if we could start with Fedotov's, please, go to INQ 004447. And initially, if we could look on page 16, do we see here, for Commander Murphy, first of all, an application in the name of Sergei Fedotov?
Yes.
It's dated the 8th of August 2017.
It is.
It's just below the barcode.
Yes.
And do we see immediately below that the date, the planned arrival date, is given as the 1st of September 2017?
It is, yes.
Thank you. And if we could then go on to page 20, please, within this document. Thank you. So just looking at the top, Commander Murphy, first of all, another reference to the planned arrival date.
Yes.
1st of September. Just casting our eyes a few lines down, you see at sort of on the numbers on the left, number 22, there are some contact details that are sought.
Yes.
And there's a phone number given ending in 8270, will we come to find that is significant?
It is significant, yes, and that was the first point at which we had the telephone number for Fedotov within our investigation.
Thank you. And if we could just now scroll down to the bottom of this page, there is a, that's fine, just there. Do you see at line 27, there's an inquiry, no doubt a standard inquiry, about previous visits to the UK.
Yes.
We'll remind ourselves that Fedotov, that this application form is being completed in August 2017.
Yes.
And we can see that there are, I think, two previous visits referred to. The one we're just looking at, late February, early March 2017. I think if we scroll down, there's another one.
Might be a third, yes.
There's in fact three. So March,
yes.
Also March, April 2016 and July 2016.
Yes.
Did you make inquiries into those apparent visits to the UK?
Yes, we did, yes.
And if we just note for a moment the first of those visits, the 28th of February to the 4th of March 2017, was that one in particular of some significance?
Yes.
And if we could go, please, to the police report, so it's INQ 005820, page 79.
Just slow down a minute, Mr. 5829,
Page 79
page 79.
of the police report. We will, and at the bottom of the page, please, we will come back, Commander Murphy, to various issues around travel.
Yes.
But just to note in passing, well, you tell us what inquiries did you make and what did you find about travel in late February, early March 2017?
On that particular trip, Fedotov flew to Paris, Charles de Gaulle, but then travelled on the Eurostar to London on the 28th of February. And on the same day, Petrov flew from Moscow to London Heathrow. And Petrov then was booked into the City Stay Hotel, which becomes significant for this operation. So overlapping travel between Fedotov and Petrov.
Petrov goes to the city stay,
Yes, sir.
right?
On the 28th, he flies into London,
Yes, got that.
and Fedotov has travelled from Paris to London on that same day,
Yep.
and Petrov is booked into the City Stay Hotel.
So we haven't got information about, or at least not yet, about
Yes.
where Fedotov stayed.
Yes, correct, sir, yes.
Right.
Thank you. So in any event, that's an example of Fedotov having referred to a previous visit in his visa on the visa application,
Yes.
and inquiries demonstrating not only that in fact he did come to the UK on that time, but that he came on that occasion with Petrov.
Yes, so at least they were certainly in London together on that in that period of time.
Yes.
In London together, but not travelling together by the look of it.
Absolutely, sir.
Right.
And we'll just remind ourselves then, late February, early March 2017, so almost exactly a year before
Yes.
the events in Salisbury.
Absolutely correct.
If we may turn to Petrov's visa application form. So for that, can we have please INQ 004445 and page 27, somewhat surprisingly, is the front page. Do we see there an application in the name of Petrov, dated the 11th of November 2017?
Yes.
And if we could go, please, to page 31 within this document. Again, it's obviously a similar layout to the Fedotov application we were just looking at.
Yes.
At the top of the page, we see that the planned arrival date is given as the 1st of December 2017.
Yes.
So about 3 weeks after the date of the application.
Yes. We subsequently know that obviously they travelled in March, not in December. But
Yes, but well, I'm going to ask you about that. The period is given as 9 days. There's a hotel, and it's stated also that he will be travelling alone.
Yes.
It's the very top line. Are you travelling with anyone? No. Yes.
Correct.
Just as we did with Fedotov, if we cast our eyes down, the phone number is given 8100. Did that become important to the
Yes, it
investigation?
does. Yes, certainly for the evidential part of our inquiry.
And as we did with Fedotov, could we look towards the bottom of the page about the entries for previous travel? There are two entries given. One is for the late February, early March 2017 visit. That's the one we've just looked at.
Yes. At the same time as Fedotov.
Same time as Fedotov, city stay.
Yes.
And we will note that there is also a reference to an earlier visit in early December 2016.
Yes.
And did you inquire into that episode, the early December 2016 visit?
Yes, we did. Yes. And
if we may, can we go back to the police report, please? So it's INQ 005820 to page 78. So it's the page before in the police report that we were just looking at.
Yes.
So if we could scroll up a little, please. So there's, in the box on the left, we see, in fact, the 25th of November to the 6th of December. The first paragraph of that section deals with some travel on the continent.
Yes.
But then the lower paragraph indicates that, indeed, Petrov did visit London between the 1st of December and the 6th of December 2016, and that on that occasion he was accompanied not by Fedotov but by Bosworth.
That's correct, yes. They then returned on the 6th of December together.
And I don't want to go to all the underlying documents, Commander, but can you give us an indication as to how you established that trip was in fact made and the city stay and so on?
Yeah, so with any investigation, as I'm sure you can imagine, we're almost looking at the sort of top of the pinnacle of the mountain, if you like, of the amount of information recovered in the inquiry. So every time we found a movement or any information within any of our inquiries relating to either the three of them, then obviously we would subsequently trace that detail in an awful lot of with an awful lot of work and a lot of data to get to the point where we were doing this. So anytime we found this movement, we would then check their entry and exit into the country, any potential bookings in hotels, anything within their visa applications that, or other information which might have indicated where they stayed and how long they were here.
Thank you. And then finally, so we've looked at the visa application forms for Fedotov and Petrov. If we could look at the similar form for Bosharov, please. That's INQ 004443. And if we could go to page 22. Thank you. Do we see, Commander, an application in the name of Ruslan Bosharov dated the 13th of November 2017?
Yes, that's correct.
So that is 2 days after the application made by Petrov.
Petrov, yes.
And if we go to page 26 of this document, please. Do we see, again, looking at the very similar entries to those we've looked at with the others, the date of planned arrival is the 1st of December 2017?
Yes.
The same date as had been given by Petrov?
Petrov, yes.
Like him, it is said he would be, Bosharov says he would be travelling alone.
Yes.
It's a different hotel that he gives, isn't it?
That's correct.
And if we could go further down. Sorry, we may have gone too far. Yes, if you see line 22, there's a number. It in fact appears in full.
Yes.
It ends 2777. Was that a number you investigated?
It was, yes.
We will come to see, I think, that unlike the other two, that wasn't the number that Bosharov used in 2018.
Certainly not while he was in the UK. That's correct.
Right. And then if we look down finally to the previous visits, line 27, there's one visit given, the 1st to the 8th of December
Yes.
2016. That's the visit that we've just looked at.
That he made with Boscherov, yes, and Petrov together.
We've noted, Commander, that these two applications, Boscherov and Petrov, were made within a couple of days each other.
Yes.
Is that something you regard as significant?
Yes, and I think when you look at their overall pattern of travel, the times that are booked and how they travel, it's quite significant that they're frequently done within a day or two of each other or on the same day.
We've looked at those earlier visits, the late February, early March 2017, and also the December 2016
Yes.
visit. As we just noted, both Petrov and Boscherov, when they made their applications in November 2017, indicated they were planning to come to this country in early December
Yes.
of that year, 2017.
Yes.
Did you make similar inquiries to see whether that visit took place?
Yes.
And what was the outcome?
We weren't able to identify that they'd been here at that time.
Right. Were you, in fact, able to identify any further visits to this country before the one that we're talking about this morning in March 2018?
So no, we weren't, and it looked like this visit was the one, the most significant one.
We will come to see that the flights that Boscherov and Petrov took,
Yes.
and Fedotov as well for that matter, were on the carrier Aeroflot.
Yes.
We know they arrived on the 2nd of March. We know they all left on the 4th of March.
Yes.
Were you able to make inquiries to establish when the bookings for those flights were made?
Yes, we were. Yes.
I'd like to ask you to look at a document which I think collates some of the information you were able to obtain in relation to that question. So if we could go, please, to INQ 005124. And thank you. We've gone to page 7. Does that? One can see that. Oh, well, first of all, can you tell us what this part of the document is?
This appears to be the passenger manifest list for the flight from Moscow to Gatwick, departing on the 2nd of March. And as you can see in the middle, we've redacted the names of other people not connected to our inquiry, but you can see Alexa Petrov seated in seat 19F.
And if we scroll down to page 8, do we see
Yes.
Boscherov?
You can see Boscherov then in 19E.
So next to Petrov.
Yes.
And similarly, if we could, so that's the that's the
flight into Gatwick.
from Moscow to Gatwick.
Yes.
And then if we could go back to page 4, please. Is this a similar sort of manifest for the homebound flight?
Yes, that's correct.
We see at the top there. Do you see departure?
Yeah, London Heathrow. They left they came into Gatwick and left via Heathrow.
And the date of the 4th of March there.
Yes, at 22:30.
And similarly, you've redacted, or someone has redacted all the names other than here, Boscherov. And if we scroll down to page 5, Petrov.
Petrov, yes.
So that is the airline information showing them on those two flights.
Yes.
But it doesn't tell us when the flights were booked.
No.
But in order to look at that, could we go first of all to page 19 within this document, please? So if we could just focus in on the very top of that, this appears to be an entry relating to Boscherov. Do you see that?
Yes.
And immediately below his name, do we see both these two flights, the flight on the 2nd to Gatwick and
Yes.
the flight back to Moscow on the 4th from Heathrow?
Yes.
And then you will have to help us with this, Commander Murphy, but if we then look below, there are a series of entries, many of which bear the date, the 1st of March.
Yes.
What do these tell us in summary?
These appear to be the time at which the flight was booked.
Right.
So in essence, the day before flying into Gatwick, these appear to be the flights booked by them. certainly by Boshoff.
I'm sure you're right. Just explain.
It's extremely
How do we read
It's
it?
extremely complicated. So, in essence, if you see the time as a new booking, so where it says amend, it's a new booking on the line that starts with DSU, sir.
Yep,
If you go along, you'll see amend new.
got you.
It was at this point that this was a new booking made in the name of Rosalind Bosheroff to London Gatwick on the 1st of March, paid for on the 1st, booked on the 1st of March.
Right.
I think that we can scroll down and see that the computer has generated a number of entries,
Yes.
including some on the 2nd of March. Are you able to help us with what those might be?
I'm afraid I'm not familiar with those, although they did make some flight changes while they were here in the UK, but I believe that was before that. 2nd of March will be the departure day anyway, so
No, the 4th of March was the departure.
sorry. The incoming is what I meant. The departure from Moscow into Gatwick.
Yes, yes. All right. Well, we may have taken that as far as we can. Then, just for completeness, go to page 23. Is this a similar page, this time for Petrov?
Petrov, yes.
So again, we can see the his name and the 2 flights at the top,
Yes.
and a similar series of entries below.
Yes.
One thing, is this right, that we think we can take from these documents is that the flights were booked on the 1st of March,
Correct.
the day before they travelled.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do they give the time of bookings? They do, don't they?
I believe, sir, it's 10:44 on the
Well, what I
1st.
was going to ask were they at much the same time? I've forgotten the last one.
We could go, it's page 19 that
got
we
a
would
feeling
want to
they
go
may
back
have
to.
been.
10:44, sir.
Yes.
Right. So booked on the same time on the same day.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. The last question about the flights, Commander Murphy. I think you said at the very outset of your evidence about your career history that you were involved in the Litvinenko investigation.
That's correct.
And of course, there's a broadly parallel situation there of individuals flying into London from Russia, subsequently suspected of having poisoned someone
Yes.
in London,
Yes.
with a rather unusual weapon, although very different.
Yes.
But similar in the sense that there was at least a possibility that the weapon, in that case, polonium, would have left some sort of trace.
Yes.
And in Litvinenko, there were efforts made, were there not, to seize and undertake testing on the aeroplanes themselves,
Yes.
the furniture inside them. Was there a similar exercise undertaken in this case?
Yes, we did try to locate that aircraft for a period of time. It appeared to remain outside of our jurisdiction, so we were unable to secure it.
So when you say that aircraft, which one do you mean?
The aircraft that they flew in on the London Gatwick.
That Petrov and Bosheroff?
Petrov and Bosheroff
arrived on.
flew in, yes.
Was it limited to that? Limited to that plane?
Yes, at that time, yes.
All right. So in the end, no testing took place?
No testing of the aircraft, no.
Thank you. Let's move forward, if we can, to the arrival of the 3 men in London on that day. And I wonder if we could go to the CCTV footage that we have. So please could we, INQ 006032, the video, could we play please from 30 seconds in to 2 minutes and 51 seconds?
On Friday, the 2nd of March 2018, Fedotov entered the UK via London Heathrow Airport, Terminal 4. At 10:58, he walked through the terminal carrying a bag with a strap over his left shoulder. At 11:18, he walked through customs and continued into the arrivals hall. By this time, he had collected a small suitcase. On Friday, the 2nd of March 2018, Bosherov and Petrov entered the UK via London Gatwick Airport, North Terminal. At 16:22, Petrov walked through the arrivals area, pushing a small wheeled suitcase and wearing a crossbody bag over his left shoulder. At the same time, Bosherov entered the arrivals area, carrying over his right shoulder a holdall and a crossbody bag.
Thank you. Commander Evie, then that's the CCTV footage on that day at the two different airports.
Yes.
Just want to ask you a couple of questions about those, if I may. First of all, could we go, please, to the graphics pack? That's 5819, page 60. While that's brought up, that we will come, will we not, Commander, to talk about a small grey rucksack.
We will, yes.
That was carried both by Bosherov and Petrov on the Sunday, the 4th of March in Salisbury.
Correct.
And there are various respects in which that is of interest. And we can see, can't we, if we look at the sort of middle column there, that's right, that is, in fact, Petrov carrying the rucksack on that day.
Yes, correct.
And we will hear that it was at an earlier stage carried by Bosherov.
Bosherov, yes.
But it's the rucksack I want to ask you about for the moment, because we've just seen all three of the men come in a couple of days earlier on the Friday.
Yes.
Broadly, my broad question is, were you able to reach a view about whether any of them were carrying that rucksack on that day when they arrived at Heathrow and Gatwick?
It would appear not, no. So on their entry to the country, we can see no evidence of that rucksack.
The only one of them carrying what's obviously a rucksack when they arrived was Fedotov.
Fedotov, yes.
Wasn't it? I wonder if we could actually go back, please, to the video. So it's INQ 006032, having noted what that grey rucksack looks like. And if we could go, please, to 1 minute 34 seconds in. There's quite a clear there.
Yes.
We see the rucksack he's carrying on his back.
Yes, it appears to be one of those quite large tubular rucksacks that has handles to carry it normally, and then rucksack straps as well, with some writing across the top there and a label, but a black bag, not the same as the grey one.
It doesn't seem to be the same at all. Thank you. And so, with gratitude, could we go back to 5819, page 60, please? We get only a brief glimpse of Petrov and Bosherov as they go through those corridors in the airport, and there are pictures here.
Yes.
In the bottom left-hand corner, but in summary, neither of them seem to be carrying that grey rucksack, do they?
Not coming in at all, no.
Yeah.
That's post-baggage hall, is it?
Yes, so they've been through immigration, collected their baggage, and they're going through those little narrow, secure areas as they come through. They're walking through different ones, which is why they're the same time, which is clearly a factor.
Yes, I want to pick up on that point because it is something. It does. We will come back to it, but I want. It's the same two photos, but there are better versions of the photos. If we could go within the graphics pack to page 17, please. So if we could zoom in for the moment, just on both together, the two pictures in the middle there. So these are the stills, are they not?
Yes.
Of Petrov and Bosherov arriving at Gatwick. And we can see, if you just look at the bold time where it says real time,
Yes,
it's exactly the same time, isn't it?
it is, yes.
And the suggestion has been made that two people can't walk down the same corridor at the same time, and therefore perhaps there's something wrong with those photographs.
Yes,
When we come to see the Russia Today interview, these photographs will be described, perhaps a little ambitiously, as the images that have puzzled the whole world.
yes.
Is there in fact an explanation for how these two photographs could
Yes,
have been taken at the same time?
Yes, very simple one. So, as you know, when you collect your luggage at an airport and you then walk through the customs hall, and as you come through the customs hall, then you walk through these narrow walkways with automatic doors that open in front of you. Well, in this particular terminal, there isn't just one of those; there are several, and so they walk through these two narrow walkways, different walkways together, at the same time. So in fact, I know you can't see it on here, but there will be different camera numbers as well.
Yes. Well, I think we can have a go at seeing it. So the up of that's Petrov, isn't it?
Yes,
And can you see the number along the top there, which is 222?
yes.
Is that the number of the camera?
222, yes. I believe it is, yes.
And it's not quite as clear on the other one, but if we could look at the other one, please. Do we see, if we look, it actually says 221 there?
Yes, it's pretty unclear on that one, but yes, it is 221.
I'm not going to ask to go back to it, but it is. I noticed as we were looking at the CCTV in the compilation, it's much clearer there.
Yes,
But is that your understanding? Different corridors, different cameras,
yes,
221 and 222.
yes. They are not walking through the same channel at the same time as suggested. They are, in fact, in two different channels at the same time.
While we're on this page, do we see helpfully set out there the sort of registration cards that we will see were completed by individuals at the two different hotels where they stayed?
Yes.
So the top one, as we look at it, the Shakespeare Hotel, who stayed there?
Yeah, so it's, I think it actually was called the Dolphin, this one. It's called two things, but it was the Dolphin, and this was Fedotov.
Yes, we can actually see
Staying
it's
in
got, both,
Paddington.
it's got both names on the card.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
This was where Fedotov stayed, and if we just zoom in one more time, we see his name, and also at the bottom there, his room, 974.
Yes,
And if we could look at the other card, the City Stay Hotel, we've heard
yes,
this was not the first time that this hotel had been used.
correct.
We see the two names towards the top left of that card,
Yes,
and the room number 108 towards the bottom in a circle. Do you see it there?
yes,
We'll hear more evidence about how that card was completed and by whom.
yes.
Thank you. The last point on the airport, Commander Murphy, you have described the conclusions that you drew as a result of all the investigation undertaken by Operation Katerva.
Yes,
And the central conclusion is that these two men, Petrov and Bosherov, applied Novichok to the door of 47 Christa Miller Road
yes,
2 days after these photographs were taken.
correct.
We will talk a little about how it may have been that they had the Novichok with them on that day. But one possibility, amongst others, is that they brought it in to the country with them as they arrived at Gatwick in the images we've seen.
That is, of course, one possibility, yes. And I think it's important to say that the Novichok was in a bottle. We've seen the Nina Ricci box and bottle. It was, in effect, made to look like an ordinary perfume in an ordinary perfume sample bottle. So would have facilitated transport in some way. We don't actually know. It's important to say how it came in, but it's important to say that it's been created that way to allow it to be transported.
Created to allow it to be transported to look normal.
Quite ordinary, yes.
Therefore, could have been brought in that sense either by Petrov or Bosherov into
Yes.
Gatwick, or we will come to see that it may be that Petrov and Bosherov met with Fedotov
Yes.
before the Sunday. So another possibility is that he could have brought it into Heathrow and given it to them after they'd all arrived in London.
Correct.
Are you able to say in this open session whether detection systems at Gatwick or Heathrow, hand baggage, hold baggage, would have identified Novichok if it had been brought in that way?
I'm not able to talk about that in this open session.
Right. Let's move on, please, to the travel into London then. First of all, we've heard that Fedotov arrived first on that day.
Yes.
Could we go to the police report, please? So INQ 005820 to page 10. And picking it up at paragraph 29, you say here, and I say you, Commander Murphy, I can't now remember whether the sort of genesis of the police report has been referred to in evidence, but can you help us? What organisation prepared this, and what is this report?
Yes, thank you. It has been referred to, but so this is a report that summarises all of CT Policing's activity within the inquiry. It was created by Operation Verbasco, which is an operation that was created in order to support the inquiry, sir, and ensure that all of our information was disclosed and considered within the content of this report.
So it's a document you can speak to because of your central involvement in
Yes, it was my team that pulled this together in order to present here, sir.
And you refer at paragraph 29 of this document then to Fedotov's movements being tracked by reference to cell site data
Yes.
associated with a mobile phone number that he listed on multiple visa applications. We've looked at one of them, but did he use the same number on the others as well?
Yes.
And you then go on to say we can see, just like casting our eyes down to paragraph 30, that analysis of the cell sighting data establishes his journey to his hotel, the Dolphin / Shakespeare Hotel, taking the Piccadilly line from Heathrow into central London.
Yes, that's correct.
We'll come to look at that, but I want to ask you a little more about cell sighting before we do.
Yes.
Is it right to say this is a perfectly conventional police investigative tool?
Yes, commonly used.
And is it fair to say it works by the police or whichever investigative authority it is making a request to a telecoms company to provide data about the use of a particular phone?
Yes.
It may be that you provide a name or a number, and what you will get back is information from the telecoms company, assuming that you've made an appropriate request.
Yes, they're very different types of requests depending on what you're looking for, but absolutely one of the requests is to ask for analysis of the location of that phone when it was connected to the telephone network.
And
It's which mast the thing has connected to.
Absolutely so, yes.
You'll explain, no doubt, the limitations of that.
Yes.
we will come to that. And no doubt a request of this nature would be for a limited period of time.
Yes.
And so here is probably a particularly easy example. You are interested in the movements of this man between the time he arrived at Heathrow on the 2nd
Yes.
and flew from Heathrow on the 4th.
And the departure on the Sunday, yes.
And very broadly speaking, we will come to see it. The telecoms companies, is this right, are able to provide two different sorts of data.
Correct.
One call data.
Yes.
And what do we mean by that?
So that's data where you're either making or receiving calls, and it can also apply to messages and things like that as well. So it's the record of that data of the call.
It looks a little bit like a telephone bill.
Yes.
I'm not sure people have telephone bills anymore, but it's a list of calls made, calls received,
Yes.
messages sent and received.
Yes. Usually with the phone number that it's sent and received to, for example, and a time frame of that call.
But just for the, importantly, not the content.
Not the content.
So that's, if you like, call data. And then separately, what we've been talking about for a few minutes, cell sighting.
Yes.
What is that?
So in essence, that is when the phone connects to a phone mast. So you know, if you're using your phone and you notice that you have low signal, you're not connecting to a mast very well, or it's too far away from you. So your phone, depending upon the phone you have clearly, but your phone will be searching for masts so that it has the strongest possible connection for you to be able to use your phone in the way you would.
And again, just to be clear, is the cell sighting information available only in connection with a call that's been made or a text that's been sent or received, or not?
Not all the time. Sometimes it will call it a ping, but it is in essence where your phone connects to a network, so it will show that the phone was connected to that mast. It may be that you're not actually undertaking any activity on the phone at that time.
So in theory, one could spend a whole day not making any phone calls, not sending or receiving any texts.
Yes.
Your phone's simply on in your pocket, and all that time it would be connecting to masts, and so a request of the nature we've just described would bring back information about where that phone had been in broad terms during the day.
That's particularly the case with a smartphone, because of course it is constantly reaching out to the network to understand the best connection that's possible and available to it.
So just coming back to the facts of this case, as we've said, the period of 2nd to the 4th of March is obviously the period you're interested in, not just for Fedotov, but for Bosherov and Petrov as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen already in the visa application forms some phone numbers that were available to you. Were requests of the type we've just discussed made in relation to those phone numbers?
Yes. Pretty much any number we had that we felt was connected to the three individuals, requests were made.
Now, we're interested, of course, in movements and calls made and so on in the UK within that period.
Yeah.
Were these UK phone numbers?
No, so they were a bit like Yulia's phone, actually. They were Russian network devices that were roaming here in the UK. So that means they were overseas, away from their home country, but still connecting to an international network, in this case here in the UK.
So did that make it, does that mean that the application for the type of data we've just been discussing had to be made to a Russian company, or could it, or not?
It was so it was about the connection to the network here in the UK made by those Russian numbers. It's a different matter. One of the things that we can do here in the UK is with an authority and under legislation, ask a provider to provide us with nominal details of the owner of a device, for example. But clearly in this case, these were Russian numbers, so we were not able to do that.
But the fact that you couldn't apply to Russia didn't mean that there was a dead end, because they had been using UK networks, and so
once they're here, they're here.
It was the UK networks who were able to provide some information.
Yeah.
All right. Now, just focusing back on Fedotov for a moment.
Yes.
We won't go back to it, but on his visa application form, the number he provided, and I think we've heard it was the same for some of his earlier applications as well.
Yes, multiple.
Was the number ending 8270?
Yes.
So you've spoken of a number of, whole range of requests that were made. Well, one of them, is this right, was for the number 870?
8270, yes.
And did that particular request yield positive results?
Yes, we were able to see both some call information, but also some location information.
So in the broadest sense, that phone or the SIM card had been
connecting to a UK network
active within that period in the UK.
Yes.
And if we could go to INQ 005852, please. Commander Murphy, is this a document that is familiar to you?
Yes, this is in essence that information we were talking about.
We see at the top the name Vodafone. So in this case, was that the network which provided these results?
Yes, I believe so. So what's happened is the partner network for that home Russian network is Vodafone in this case. So Vodafone have provided the information.
It's very difficult to read, but perhaps you'll take it from me. This is the schedule which provides the results.
Yes.
For that 8270 number. I think we will probably see that's 8270 in that column on the left-hand side there.
Yes.
Yeah. But I don't want to take you to the fine detail of this schedule, Commander Murphy, but in broad terms, is this a typical response that you might receive from a provider
Yes.
in response to a request like this?
It is.
And if we just look at the first page, of the two types of data we've discussed, the call data and the cell sighting data, which of them do we see here?
I'm afraid I can't actually see
Right.
that.
Is it? We can see, for example, that there are phone numbers.
Yes.
Is this the call data?
Yes. And then it provides details of the device, for example, in the middle column there.
Yes. But if we just scroll down, it would appear that the results. Keep going, please. So for the page 1 and 2, that would appear to be the call data.
Yes,
that
correct.
was received. If we can carry on, in fact, go to page 4. This
is the location.
This is the cell sighting, the
Yes.
location data, and that in fact goes on for quite a few pages.
Yes.
So single request, a sort of compendious response that comes back,
Yes.
giving you both of that type of information. If we could then please, with that schedule in mind, go back to the graphics pack, so 005819, page 18. I think we have established, Commander Murphy, that those schedules are not easy to read.
Yes.
And not easy to sort of navigate oneself through. Has your team very helpfully transferred the information from that schedule, and as we will come to see, other similar schedules,
Yes.
and turned them into these much more user-friendly product maps where we can actually see the cell sighting?
Correct. So this would be the cell sighting of that device, and then, as you can see, on occasion, if there's any, there aren't any here, I believe, but any call data that might be applied as well. So to those.
Yes. Now,
In fact, there are.
just to, could we just zoom in on just the map and the sort of the right-hand side, so we could just see it slightly larger. That's it. So we can see. And we will find this is the same with all the other plans that we will look at. It's essentially little extracts from the table.
Yes.
Which are superimposed with a line to a little blob with a
Yes.
number in it.
Correct.
Are the blobs masts?
The blobs are the phone masts. Yes.
And so we look at the mast, we go back to the little schedule, and we can see the sort of the cell site events related to that mast, in particular the timing.
Yes. Correct.
The blobs, the round red blobs of the mast, so then it's not in their places, presumably, because you've got several twos and several ones all over the shop,
Yes.
but they're references to identified connections.
Yes, they are the masts, sir. And then if you see a number, it's the number of connections the phone makes rather than an order in which we should view them.
Thank you.
No.
Now, this is a map relating to Fedotov's cell site. So, in other words, it's drawn from the schedule we were just looking at.
Yes.
We will come to see similar schedules which relate to Petrov and Bosforov's phone.
Correct, we will.
Can we take it that they have been prepared in the same way? In other words, they're based on underlying schedules.
Yes. Applications in exactly the same way, with information from a provider that then an analyst has helped us to present in this way.
Yes. And again, just in generality, this information is obviously of great use.
Yes.
But one has to be a little careful about it. Is that right? It certainly it tells us where a phone is connecting to a mast at any particular time.
Yes.
Of course, one assumes that the phone is in the person who owns its pocket at any one time. But also, is this right? Well, it's obvious, is it not, that the person is not going to be standing next to the mast all the time. They might be some distance from it.
Yes, absolutely. So there are some limitations to cell site evidence in that it, in essence, indicates a device is connected to a network. And particularly in big cities or in built-up areas or busy areas with lots of people, for example, a phone may actually connect to several different masts within one location. So it is important to understand that it gives an indicative, for example, in this case, it provides an indication that Fedotov's device is moving, but it won't give a precise location, and it will occasionally, a phone be in one place, and particularly in the city like this, it will sometimes connect to 2 or 3 different masts when you're standing in one place at different times.
Yes, so just to take that, I mean, let's use you as an example, Commander. You know, no doubt you haven't got a phone in your pocket
No.
because this is level 2.
Yes.
But it would be possible for a phone that was perfectly stationary in the middle of London
Yes.
to connect to one mast, and then it might connect to another one simply because the first mast was busy or...
Yes. Or your device decided there was a better signal from another mast. Whatever.
Exactly. So the cell sighting would then look as though, or one might think from looking at the cell sighting, that the phone had moved in that period.
Yes.
In fact, it hadn't.
So you could tell I was in this general area, but not pinpoint me to a specific location.
Yes, and that, as you say, that brings us back to this map. So if we could zoom out again, what one certainly can see from this map, as we saw in the police report,
Yes.
is that the phone is moving away from the general direction of Heathrow towards the general direction of London.
London, yes.
And you have made the assessment based on the various masts that it connected to along the way. Not unreasonable, perhaps, that Fedotov travelled on the Piccadilly line
Yes.
into central London. We can see the timings as one moves away from Heathrow towards London. If we could go on to page 19, a similar situation. Just 2 further points, and then I may suggest we take a break. First of all, these particular plans that we're looking at, Commander Murphy, show almost exclusively, or I think exclusively, cell sighting data for the phone.
Yes.
We will note as we go on, I think both with Fedotov's phone and with the other phones, that as well as the cell sighting data, that we occasionally see SMS messages sent or received,
Yes.
phone calls,
Yes.
incoming, outgoing. Are you able to tell us anything in general terms about those calls, about whether the calls, texts are significant or not?
I'm not able to talk about that further here, no.
All right, thank you. And then the last point about all of this is, as we will see, the results of your investigation were, as it happens, that each of the 3 men did have a phone with them,
Yes.
which occasionally cell-sighted. We see occasional calls and texts and so on.
Yes.
But we don't. First of all, we don't find more than one phone for either of them, do we?
No.
That's not to say they didn't have other phones. It's possible they did.
Correct.
We just don't know.
Yes.
So we shouldn't assume that the totality of their phone activity is recorded in these documents.
No. So this will be the activity recorded on the devices we've been able to identify as a result of our inquiries, but there could clearly be other devices.
Yes.
Well, these are the ones that are mentioned basically on the visa application.
Yes, absolutely. So although Bosherov's number came from slightly different data we'll come to later, but yes, absolutely these are the ones that we were able to identify connected to them.
So I'm about to move on to another subject. Perhaps that would be a convenient moment for a break.
Yes, of course. 25 to 12, please.
Commander Murphy, before the break, we were discussing cell sighting generally, and we were looking at the cell sighting results which showed Fedotov
Yes.
travelling in from Heathrow into the centre of London on the afternoon of Friday, the 2nd of March.
Yes.
I now want to switch to ask you some questions about Bosherov and Petrov and their arrival in London a little bit later that day. And if we could start by going to the police report, so that's INQ 005820, page 11. And if we then look, first of all, at paragraph 31, we see the reference there to Petrov and Bosherov landing in Gatwick.
Yes.
They were captured on CCTV at 16:22. That's the footage we've seen.
Yes.
And then at paragraph 32 of the report, there's a reference, is there not, to cell site material relating to Bosherov and Petrov.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
And we'll go to this in a little bit more detail, but just in summary, we see the report refers, in terms of Petrov, to a phone number obtained both from a UK visa application that he made in November 2017.
Yes.
That's the application we looked at earlier this morning.
Yes.
And also from a 2016 Netherlands visa application.
Yes.
So for your note, I'm not going to go to it, but it's INQ 005849, page 45. But Commander Murphy, you mentioned earlier the sort of range of evidential searches and requests that you made.
Yes.
We've looked at I think this is a different Dutch application, but was this just another of the sort of requests made which brought back
Yes, in essence.
information?
If we saw travel or we saw anything of relevance to the three individuals and it was international, we would go to that country and ask through the formal legal process for them to provide us information. That's what they did in this case.
And so is it right then that through both of those sources, the UK visa application and the Netherlands visa application, you understood the link between Petrov and the phone number ending 8100?
Correct.
And were requests made for call data, cell sighting data in relation to that phone number?
In the same way that we did for Fedotov.
And did they provide positive results?
Yes.
And we'll come to see what they were in due course. But then, as far as Bosherov is concerned, I'm sorry, if we could go back to paragraph 32 of the police report. The position is a little more complicated, is it not?
Yes.
We saw the November 2017 visa application that we looked at right at the start. That gave the number 2777. Were requests made on that number?
Yes.
Did they provide results?
We found no data of relevance.
Were you, I don't know, it doesn't matter whether it was sequential at the same time, but were you making other requests to try to understand any other phone numbers that might be associated with Bosherov?
Yes. So in essence, as I explained earlier, any number that came to us or any information that came to us, we would conduct further checks as required. And in terms of Bosherov, we were able subsequently to get his phone number from the booking.com booking.
Yes. So it's the last sentence of paragraph 32. It says CTP obtained Bosherov's phone number from a booking.com reservation made under the name Ruslan Bosherov for 10 days in an apart hotel in Geneva in December 2017.
Yes.
Just to understand that in a little more detail, can we go please to INQ 005933? Is this document, and we'll come to this particular page, Commander Murphy, but is it right that a request was made to the Dutch authorities?
Yes.
In respect of information relating to booking.com, and is what we're looking at the response you received back from the Dutch authorities?
So yes, booking.com is based in Holland, which meant we went through the Dutch government to make this request.
And the document we're looking at is the response you received from the authorities
Yes.
back?
Yes.
In fact, in this part of the response, they set out the request that you had made. And so we can see at the top there's a paragraph summarising your investigation.
Yes.
And then we see little Roman 2, the UK authorities, that's you,
Yes.
saying that there might be information held in the Netherlands. And in particular, if we look down to, it's in a sense you are, in essence, you are asking the Dutch authorities to approach Booking.com and obtain any and all information held in relation to, and then a list of hotel reservation ID numbers, obviously relating back to Booking.com's business.
Yes.
Which relates to Alexander Petrov.
Yes.
Again, is that just a standard
Yes.
type of application?
Yes.
We have to be wary, don't we, to remind ourselves that we are only looking at the sort of the final results of Operation Caterva. Were there not numerous requests of this nature?
Yeah, it's really important, I think. Thank you. It's a really important point because obviously this is a request to the Dutch in relation to Booking.com, an activity on Booking.com. But in order to discover this, clearly there's a huge amount of work and investigative work that goes on behind the scenes to gather this information that then allows you to submit requests like this so that you can then move the inquiry on through the next stage. So, yes, while we're today talking about the relevant parts of the investigation, but behind that is a very significant amount of work and engagement with partners.
Yeah, and for every query like this that bore some fruit, no doubt many queries that didn't take you anywhere.
Yes, correct.
In any event, the reason we're looking at this is because it did become important.
Yes.
And if we could go on within the response to page 42, please. Is this the part of the response from the Dutch authorities that records the information that they had been provided with by Booking.com?
By Booking.com, yes.
So it starts with that list of hotel reservation numbers, which we perhaps don't need to dwell on. And then if we could go on to the next page, please. Did they, in essence, provide a spreadsheet? Booking.com provided a spreadsheet of all the information they held, which tallied with those reservation numbers.
Yes, so it was in essence all the booking information from the account. So,
and if we could go, please, it's actually 11 lines up from the bottom. Do we see? Can you see over towards the right? Well, 3 columns in with the list of numbers. There are 2 entries there with the number 10.
yes,
And we will recall, I think, in the police report, there was a reference to having spent 10 days in an apart hotel in Geneva.
in Geneva, yes,
Somewhere.
yes.
And is it the line that we are needing to be interested in? Is it the top one there, which refers to Bosherov?
Yes.
But just pausing there, without going into detail, we can see that, in fact, this request generated an awful lot of information, some of it about Fedotov and Petrov, as well as Bosherov.
Yes, and you will have seen other names on there as well, and it's just important to say, I suppose we were, in any investigation, you clearly don't just focus on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 people that you're interested in. You clearly keep your inquiries as broad as possible for information in your inquiry. So there are other names here as well, yes. But in this case, that the highlighted line is the important one.
Yeah, and is this right? This is one of those situations where one has a large spreadsheet which appears on a computer screen.
Yes.
And it doesn't work very well to divide it up into A4 sheets.
Yes, correct.
But if we could go on to the next page, please. Is this the next section of the spreadsheet?
Yes.
So if we can go 11 lines up from the bottom again.
Oh, I see.
Do we see there are just where it says PD in the
Yes.
there are 2 references to an apart hotel in Geneva.
In Geneva, yes.
Is that the 2 10-day bookings?
It's the one from before, yes.
And we will remember from the previous page that it was the upper one of those 2 that relates to Bosherov.
Yes.
And between PD and the apart hotel are those phone numbers.
2550, yes.
So it's the 2550 phone number which relates back to Bosherov.
Yes.
And was therefore a different phone number to the 2777 number which was on the visa application form.
Yes.
And did you then make the same sort of cell site and call data inquiries of the networks relating to that new number, the 2550 number?
Yes.
And did that number bear fruit in relation to the period the 2nd to the 4th of March?
It did.
And as we'll see, it was used in London between those times.
Yes.
Thank you. So with all that by way of explanation, if we could now go within the graphics pack, so it's INQ 005819 to page 21, first of all. And does this show, in a similar way to the earlier map we were looking at for Fedotov, does it show Petrov and Bosherov arriving in Gatwick?
Yes.
We may or may not become familiar, but I think it is right to say that throughout the plans for the next few days, in terms of the 2nd to the 4th of March, the grids with the green shading for the number 2550, as we've just been discussing, that's Bosherov's number.
Yes, correct.
And the blue ones are Petrov.
Yes.
But what we see here, at any rate, is both of their phones cell sighting, and also we can see making some outgoing and incoming calls and
Yes.
SMS messages.
SMS messages, yes.
The timing, we see them, both of them in Gatwick, middle of the afternoon on that Friday.
Yes.
And if we can go over the page to page 22, please. Do we see a general picture of the two phones travelling north, or I think it's north, from anyway, away from Gatwick and in the direction of Victoria Station?
Yes, correct.
Victoria?
Yes, so it's
It is Victoria,
Yes,
is it?
coming into London.
Well, I
and,
know that's one of the ways.
Yes,
You do.
yes.
And again, if we can then go on to page 23, do we see the same
The same, yes.
journey?
Just a wider angle to show the journey from the M25.
And I think we see in the police report, we'd only turned up, that the approximate arrival time in Victoria is something like 5:30 in the
Correct,
afternoon.
yes.
And then if we can go over to page 24, please. We can see, if we can zoom in on that a little, before I ask you detailed questions about this, am I right that your assessment, in general terms, is that Petrov and Bosherov travelled from Victoria Station to Bow, the
Yes.
City Stay Hotel,
Yes.
sort of later on that day, end of the afternoon, early evening?
Yes, correct.
If we just look here, we can see Petrov's blue phone. Do you see the sort of lower of those entries at 1837 in the vicinity of Waterloo,
Yes.
and then over to the left at 1848? That there's a sighting on the other bank, the west bank of the river,
Yes.
and then 1857 back on the other side of the river near Waterloo.
Yes.
One might think, and I suppose it's possible, that he did in fact go from one side of the river to the other and then back to the first side. Is there another possibility?
It's quite possible he did that, but there's also the possibility we spoke about earlier, where the mobile devices, because these are positions of Mars rather than him, so there's the possibility that the phone just connected to a different mast from that Waterloo location.
And one of the reasons I ask you about that is Waterloo does become important later in the story, doesn't it?
It does, definitely. Yes.
And is it fair that this cell sighting can give us an idea that they were in the area of Waterloo?
Yes.
We shouldn't jump to too many conclusions about which side of the river they were on at any
Yes,
particular
correct.
time.
Yeah.
We also see, the latest in time of those entries appears to show Petrov back on the south of the river at 1857.
Yes.
And then if you see the green entry above, Bosherov at Blackfriars only sort of 2 minutes later in 1859. There is a suggestion in the police report that the two men split up on their way to the City Stay Hotel, possibly part of that being those two cell sites. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, I mean, that's an assessment on the basis of what we've spoken about, so where their phones are tracking against phone masts. And when we see the next set as well, we'll see that they seem to arrive in the area of Bow at slightly different times as well. But again, this could be exactly what we've just been speaking about, where in fact they are in close proximity or still together, but the phone masts are, their phones are pinging off different masts at different times. So it's quite possible that is the case as well. There's nothing significant we've been able to discover in any suggestion they were apart at that moment in time.
Yeah. I mean, we will obviously be spending a bit of time trying to make sense of the movements of Bosworth and Petrov and Fedotov around London over these couple of days. But
Yes.
is this if you like, a cautionary example? The truth is, the evidence is not available to know exactly where these men were at any particular time.
Yes.
And although the phrase Bosworth and Petrov and Bosworth rolls off the tongue and one just automatically assumes they were together for much of the time, certainly in London, in Salisbury, there is CCTV evidence of them being together.
Yes.
But are you able, what degree of confidence do you have in London about, in general terms, them being together all the time, some of the time, one of them going off? How confident can you be about those matters?
So ultimately, we don't have CCTV of them when they were in London. So a lot of their activity is based upon the activity we're taking from the use and location of their mobile devices.
Yeah. And just, in fact, carrying on the story, we were just looking at...
Sorry, just to clarify, I
Yes.
apologise. But quite apart from the fact there are fixed positions where we know they are, like the hotel and our assessment of train journeys, things like that. But clearly, during movements in London, we're doing that on the basis of phone location.
Yeah. So, and then just, is this fair to take this as an example? It's possible and would not be inconsistent with the cell sighting that they travelled together sort of through the Waterloo area, through the Blackfriars area towards East London. But there is also a possibility that they split up for a period of time. That might also be consistent with the cell sighting.
Yes.
We were looking at the Boscherov cell site at 1859. Go over to the next page. We actually see... can you see there Petrov's phone is cell sighting on the Blackfriars mast only
Yes.
2 or 3 minutes later. So
Yes.
again, who knows? But
Yes, exactly.
maybe they were together. But as we can see in this map, in fact, we've zoomed in on it, so we've cut it off, but there's a pink dot in the top right-hand corner. That's the City Stay Hotel.
That's City Stay Hotel, yes.
You mentioned a moment ago that they may or may not have arrived together at the City Stay Hotel. Can you expand on that?
It's, again, taken from the phone data and obviously their check-in. Both names are written on the check-in form, but I think the witness, if I recall, from the City Stay Hotel recalls them checking in, but I'm not sure if that was together or not. Sorry.
Yes. Well, we'll come to that.
Yes.
Perhaps if we can go to the police report then. So INQ 005820, page 11. At paragraph 33, we see there's a summary, is there not, of the cell sighting we've just been looking at.
Yes.
The journey to London Victoria and then from Victoria through Waterloo, possibly splitting up towards Bow.
Yes.
But towards the end of that paragraph, if we can go on to the next page, both of them ending up in Bow and reasonable confidence that that's where they stayed. They were there for the night.
Yes. At least their phones didn't move until the next day.
Yes, an important qualification. And at paragraph 34, there's a reference to Boscherov and Petrov completing, or at least the hotel registration form being completed.
Yes.
With Petrov's name and contact details, and the hotel taking a photocopy of Petrov's passport.
Yes.
And room 108, which we've seen. And as you say, cell site data, for what it's worth, indicating neither of them left until the following morning.
Correct.
And now, in terms of the evidence around the hotel, we've referred to the cell site data. Is it right that a statement was taken from an employee of the City Stay Hotel?
Yes, correct.
Named Mohammed Irfan?
Yes.
And several of the footnotes in that paragraph we've just been looking refer to his statement.
Yes.
So it's a short statement. I was proposing to read it at this stage. It's INQ 004480, please. We'll see it's a statement dated the 5th of October 2018 in the name of Mohammed Irfan, and it reads, I am the above-named person, and this statement is regarding a room reservation which occurred in March 2018 at City Stay Hotel, 94 Bow Road, London E3 3AA. I've worked at the City Stay Hotel since 2010 or 2011, I'm not exactly sure. My role at the hotel is business development, and I'm responsible for monitoring the market and making sure that the hotel is competitively priced and that it's also appropriately advertised online. I also cover the front desk of the hotel and share this responsibility with my other colleagues, Mr. Saeed, and sometimes the hotel owner and my boss, Mr. Silman Mir. I've been shown a check-in form for the hotel, which is dated the 2nd of March 2018. The check-in time is shown as 19:30 hours, and it's for room 108, which is a twin room situated on the first floor of the hotel, towards the rear of the hotel, away from the main road. Room 108 has a double bed and a single bed, and also had private bathroom facilities, which consist of a shower, sink and toilet. Having looked at the check-in form, I can say that the handwriting is mine. The 2nd of March 2018 was a Friday, and I generally work during the day on a Friday, which would have been 9 in the morning until 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. The booking form shows check-in at 19:30 hours, so I can definitely say I completed the form. The booking was for 2 men to stay in the room, and it shows that their names were Alexander Petrov and it says Kuzlem, we've seen the registration forms,
Yes.
Bosharov. The form also shows that cash was paid in advance for 2 nights with a departure date of the 4th of March 2018. The room was already booked on 1st of March 2018 through booking.com under the name Alexander Petrov, and it showed a German phone number and that the guest was in Germany. We like bookings which come from Germany because we know they are confirmed bookings and that the guests will generally come. A holding charge of £64.90 had already been taken for the first night, which is normal procedure. This is cancelled once the guests pay for their stay, and this is done automatically by our card transaction provider. I can see by the way that the room number 108 is written on the booking.com email that it's not my handwriting, so I did not receive the booking. The check-in form which I have described, showing the 2 men's names, room number, date of check-in and departure, time of arrival, and which shows that £134.80 was paid in cash, I exhibit as MUI1. I've also been shown the copy of the passport attached to the check-in form. I would have taken this copy. The passport is showing Alexander Petrov, passport number 654341297. I exhibit this as MUI2. My procedure when someone books into the hotel is that I will normally ask for photo ID, which can be a driving licence or a passport. I will particularly ensure I do this if the party are all men. I clearly did this when receiving the 2 gentlemen who booked in on the 2nd of March 2018 to room 108. I will only take ID from one person in the group, so there was no ID copied from the other man, Mr. Bosharov. I will then ask the customer how they wish to pay and take payment for the duration of the stay. In this case, the paper shows they paid cash for the 2 nights. I then explained the customer's booking to them, and in this case they had booked 1 room for 2 nights with a bathroom, and that breakfast was not included. I don't generally tell customers the check-out time because it will all be explained on the booking they've made online. The check-out time, however, is 11 o'clock in the morning. Because the 2 men on this booking had not booked breakfast, this meant they would not use the kitchen. Once I explained the booking, I would show the customers their keys and explain that 1 is for their room, 1 is for their main front door. I would then tell them where their room was, and they would make their way to their room. I would not escort them to their room. That would finish the check-in process. When the customer checks out, they drop their keys at reception themselves and leave. At no time would I visit the rooms of the customers, only the cleaner would do this. With regards to this particular booking, I can say I do not remember the men at all. It was over 7 months ago, and I can receive between 15 and 35 different people on any given day. I'm aware of what has been reported in the news and that these 2 men have been named as responsible for being involved in the poisoning of other Russian people in Salisbury. I only know this because of the reporting. Despite this, I did not recognise the men when I saw them on the television. The paperwork shows the men left on the 4th of March 2018, but I cannot say if I was working for sure. But I can't recollect the men leaving, and I believe I didn't see them again after they checked in. During their stay, I can't remember there being any problems regarding the 2 men or any complaints about them. And then there's a reference to his exhibits. So just 2 or 3 points on that, Commander Murphy. First of all, as I think you mentioned a few moments ago, one can't be absolutely certain from the cell sighting that the 2 men arrived at the City Stay Hotel together.
Yes.
Mr. Irfan says he has no independent memory of all of this.
Yes.
It's clear from his statement that Mr. Petrov was there,
Yes.
because he presented his passport and it was photocopied and so on. But this statement doesn't take really it any further as to whether Bosherov was with him or not, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Secondly, there's a reference in the statement to the hotel room having been booked on the 1st of March. So that's the day before they arrived, the
Yes,
Thursday.
the same day as they book flights.
Precisely. So it's
Yes.
consistent with the evidence you obtained about the flight booking.
Yes.
And lastly, there is a reference there, and clearly Mr. Irfan had access to the hotel's booking systems and their account with booking.com. But he was able to say that the booking.com account showed a German phone number and also
Yes.
that the guest was in Germany. Can you help us a little with that?
No, I'm afraid I can't. But what I would say, Mr. Irfan may be assuming that from the fact that the number was a German number. Again, this was one of the sources of telephone numbers and other information that we were able to use within our investigation. So.
All right. That, at any rate, is the end of the day on the Friday.
Yes.
Bosherov and Petrov arriving and staying at the City Stay Hotel in East London.
The one we're talking about, which is I think is 2555, isn't it, or something like that?
Sir?
Is that a German phone number?
No, I don't believe it is, sir. No.
Okay.
I believe it's a Russian number, sir.
Yes.
I'm going to go on then, Commander Murphy, to the next day, the Saturday, the 3rd of March. Perhaps we should just remind ourselves about the weather conditions on those days generally, but we heard, of course, from Ross Cassidy.
Yes.
The weather had been very poor a day or two before that weekend. Still cold on the Saturday, but we'll recall Ross Cassidy saying that he thought that Sergei could probably have got his car out on that day, so it was improving.
Yes. I don't remember the name of the storm, but I think several witnesses gave you the name of the storm, but it was definitely snowing a lot, particularly in the southwest area at that time.
Yes. Could we go, please, to INQ 005819, so the graphics pack, page 26. So this is early in the morning on the Saturday, the 3rd of March. Commander, do you see that?
Yes.
And we can see the City Stay Hotel with the pink mark there.
Yes.
And then we can see some relatively early activity on both of the 2 phones. Again, might this be another example where we don't necessarily assume that the 2 men are out for early morning walks? Their phones could just be, and probably were, sighting to different masts.
I think that's right.
Quite possibly from inside their hotel room.
I think that's right, yes.
So really, this shows that they're either in their hotel room or close to it in the early hours of the Saturday, the 3rd of March.
Yes.
And moving on, if we may, to the next page, page 27. A little later, but the same activity close to, on the masts close to the hotel.
Yes. Very similar in location.
One can't say whether they were in the room or not, but they probably were.
Yes.
Then on to page 28, please. in the top right-hand corner, if we could look at that first of all, the green reminds us that that is an entry relating to Bosheroff's phone.
Yes.
And we can see the time is 10:21, and it's one of those masts we were just looking at close to the City Stay Hotel.
Yes.
And it's right, isn't it, that that was the last time that that phone, or that there's any data at all relating to that phone on that day until much later in the day,
Correct.
at about 6 o'clock.
Yes, that's correct. There could be many reasons for that, clearly, but it could have been that the phone was left behind, but I suspect it's just that the phone was disconnected from the network at that point.
Well, let me just pick you up on that, because we will obviously hear the evidence about Bosheroff,
Yes.
Petrov going to Salisbury in the
Yes.
intervening time. There's photographic evidence of that.
Yes.
But when the phone does come back on, it's in South London.
Correct.
And when we get to it, the suggestion will be that it's on the train journey back from Salisbury towards Waterloo. So it would seem that it wasn't left behind in the hotel room.
Correct. It
because
was
he had with him,
disconnected. Yes, from the network.
in South London later in the day. So where does that leave us by way of inference?
That it was disconnected to the network. There are several ways you could have done that, both in terms of turning it off or for example, turning on airplane mode, as we normally would when we're, if we need to switch our phones off from connecting to any kind of phone network.
Yeah, that's an important point that we will come back to, but just to be clear then, unsurprisingly, one way of preventing your phone cell sighting is switching it off.
Yes.
But but that's not the only way.
No.
And you mentioned airplane mode.
Yes.
Would that, switching your phone to airplane mode, would that have the twin effect of preventing its cell sighting,
Yes.
but still leaving it on so that you could use it for certain functions?
Yes, and of course it depends on your phone and your settings on your phone and exactly what that means to you. But yes, of course, if you're disconnecting from the telephone network, then in effect the mast will no longer pick you up, but you may still have your phone on and still be able to use some functions within it, like the camera or other functions.
Right. Well, that's a point we'll come back to, but that's, as it were, the end of Bosheroff's phone for much of the rest of the day.
Yes.
But we can see from the blue marks that Petrov's phone was not switched off at that time.
Yes.
And the markings, in summary, what do they show about at least where Petrov or Petrov's phone went in that morning?
So it appears that Petrov travelled to the Waterloo area that morning. So you'll see that 11:34 and 53 is the furthest one to the right, I suppose, of the blue dots, and then you'll see approaching Blackfriars, past Blackfriars, and then around the corner and into the Waterloo area. You'll see that again we've got the north and south of the river mast.
Yep.
It's the same as the issue we spoke about earlier. I suspect that that's in the Waterloo area, but pinging off different masts.
So thank you. So as it were, there are some blue marks a little bit further east along the river, which your suggestion is they show travel towards Waterloo.
Yes.
And then those three towards the bottom perhaps show sort of the phone in the area of Waterloo, not necessarily rushing back and forth across the bridge.
Yes.
But that is, we can see the times starting from about 11:40. Is that right?
Yes, 11:34, and then 11:40 in Waterloo. Yes. Yes.
Now we will come to see details of the train times, but for now, is it right to say that there was a period of time, about an hour or a bit less, where it would appear that Petrov and Bosheroff were in the Waterloo area before they caught the train?
Yes, it's slightly longer than that. I think the train was 12:49, so
All right.
pretty, but only just over an hour.
Yeah. Let's switch focus, if we may, then. If we go on to page 30. I think what we see here, Commander Murphy, in terms of the blue marks, those are the blue marks we've just been looking at.
Yes.
At least some of them, I think
Correct.
exactly the same. But we now see some brown marks, which is Fedotov's phone.
Yes.
What do they show us?
So that Fedotov at around 11:24, 11:25 was still cell sighting in the area of the Dolphin Hotel where he was staying, but yes, but at different times he's cell sighting in different locations. So you'll see the movement of cell site 1103, 1108, 1109. He's nearer the river, and then at different times at 1205, 1207, his phone is registering on the same mast as the phone that we've identified earlier for Petrov.
Yes, and so if we look at the bottom right-hand table, perhaps we could zoom in on that, the large one. As you say, this shows initially Petrov's phone cell sighting on that mast at 1140, and then a series of entries for Fedotov's phone all the way down to 1236.
Yeah, so for about half an hour it appears their phones are at least in proximity enough to register on the same phone mast.
Yes. So, in summary, looking at the different cell sites, is it a fair summary to say that Petrov and Petrov with his phone,
Yes.
Fedotov with his phone.
Yes.
One assumes Bosherov, although his phone was switched off by that stage.
Yes.
I use the term switched off colloquially.
Yes.
Appear to have all been in the area of Waterloo for a period of about 30 minutes or a bit longer, from, let's say, 5 minutes past 12.
Yes, correct. Our assessment is they met at that location.
Yes, well,
On that
I was
basis.
going to ask you.
Yes.
Well, can you expand on that?
So this is immediately prior to their first trip to Salisbury on the Saturday, where Petrov and Bosherov travel, not Fedotov. And the movements, corresponding timings, and taking the point we've made clearly about the issue with phone masts and geographic location, the fact that they were in such close proximity in the Waterloo area, it would appear, is significant to me in that this was prior to that trip to Salisbury. So my assessment of this is that they met at this location.
Certainly, it seems as though, we will. There is an obvious reason why Petrov and Bosherov travelled to Waterloo that morning. We will see they caught a train to Salisbury.
They did.
But less obvious why Fedotov went there, other than perhaps to meet them.
Yes, and as you know, subsequently, we've charged Fedotov with offences. It's always been my view that Fedotov is combined with these other two as a joint enterprise in order to undertake the attack in Salisbury. And so a meeting beforehand, supported by this cell site analysis, made sense to me.
Yes. We'll come back to the meeting later on. But just to go back to the timings then, we saw that Petrov, we assume, with Bosherov, arrived at Waterloo at about 11:40.
Yes.
And as I think you said, it appears to have been a little over an hour after that we assume Petrov and Bosherov caught a train to Salisbury from Waterloo.
Yes.
Could we go, please, to INQ 006121?
Just before you leave that one, Mr. O'Connor, do you mind if I ask? Sometimes, Mr. Murphy, it's possible, as I understand it at least, to experiment with a phone to see which possible masts might be within range and which are outside range. Paddington to Waterloo, we can all know is they're not exactly juxtaposed.
No.
Was it either necessary or possible to see whether, if Fedotov's phone had remained somewhere near the Dolphin Hotel, there was any possibility of it connecting to this mast in Waterloo?
So it's not a specific check we were able to do here, sir, but given it being central London, experience shows when we have run investigations in London that there's an awful lot of phone masts between Paddington and Waterloo. And in doing that, it would be unlikely, not impossible, sir, absolutely, but unlikely.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, if we could go to INQ 006121, please. Commander Murphy, this is a statement from one of your officers, I believe.
Yes,
DI VN008.
correct.
And is it a very useful statement recording analysis that was undertaken by DI VN008 and no doubt perhaps some of their team,
Yes,
considering using various types of evidence which trains Petrov and Bosherov probably caught that weekend? First of all, at the time we've now reached
yes,
from Waterloo to Salisbury on that Saturday,
yes.
but in fact also back to London from Salisbury on the Saturday and then both journeys on the Sunday.
Yes, they were quite complicated journeys because of the weather we spoke about and a few other
Yes,
issues.
there, we can see from the statement that it's not as simple as looking at the timetable because the trains weren't running to time.
Yes,
On the Sunday, we'll see that the trains weren't in fact running direct between London and Salisbury.
yes,
There was a need to change. And did the police team bear in mind the cell sighting in London, also the evidence of the CCTV in Salisbury, see
Yes.
what time, and then look at which trains actually ran and come up with a likely answer to which trains the individuals were on?
yes, absolutely. So which trains had actually ran and their times of running in order to correspond with the additional information of CCTV and cell site.
Yes. So I don't want to go through this in great detail, but we can see, if we look just down the first page, do we see this, the heading Saturday the 3rd of March, and then in bold underneath it for the outbound journey? Yes?
Yes,
And then there's various analysis. The grid underneath, I think, was probably something taken from the rail company.
yes,
It's not a timetable, it's more complicated than that,
Yes.
is it not? But if we go over the page, please. Thank you. Can you see the end of that paragraph starting, as such, it is highly likely that Petrov and Bosherov took train. Then there's a code which looks like it might be 11:35, but let's just ignore that. 'Cause
yeah,
it's
that's the train code.
it's the code
Yes.
for the train.
I should point out the reason this work was done was for this purpose, but also because post-incident we were clearly keen to identify the train used by the subjects for the same reason we discussed the aeroplane earlier, so for testing purposes. And
Yes.
so the identification of the train carriages were just as important as time at that point.
All right. Well, let's not ignore it then.
No, but
But for our purposes, the important detail comes later,
yes,
departing at 12:49 hours from London
Yes.
Waterloo, arriving at Salisbury at 14:24. So that appears to be the train that they took.
yes,
12:49 is sometime after, as we saw, it was a little over an hour after they arrived in the area.
yes,
And in between those times was the time when Fedotov was
Fedotov
cell
was
sighting, apparently, in Waterloo.
correct.
So we will come back to this statement, but can I suggest that we adduce it in its entirety?
Yes, please. 12:49 to, it's disappeared.
14:25.
14:20.
14:20 something?
14:24, sir.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on then, if we may, to the first period of time that Petrov and Bosherov spent in Salisbury, in other words, the Saturday. Just before we get into the detail, first of all, we will find, will we not, Commander Murphy, that there, neither on the Saturday nor on the Sunday is there any cell sighting material relating to either of the two phones in Salisbury.
That's correct.
Um,
And I believe that's for the reasons we spoke about earlier. So Bosherov's phone on the Saturday clearly was off the network anyway from their last registration near the bow. And I think Petrov's phone, exactly the same thing happened. So in the Waterloo area, then disconnects from the network.
and disconnects from the network in the Waterloo area. And then, I mean, we heard with Bosherov's phone, I think we'll find it's the same with Petrov's, switches on again on the train.
On the journey, well, it would appear to be, from the cell site analysis at least, within the concluding part of a train journey returning from Salisbury into Waterloo.
And there is a very similar pattern the next day as well.
Yes.
So,
So as they approach London, the phones register on the network again.
yeah. I mean, did you sort of have any hypotheses about that pattern of the phones apparently ceasing to cell site as they left London and starting to cell site again as they arrived back?
Yes, I believe that was for operational purposes for both of those two individuals to obfuscate any kind of tracking of their devices or use of their devices, and so as not to connect them to that journey and or Salisbury.
Right. So that's cell sighting. Secondly, as I've already mentioned, as of course we've already seen, there is some CCTV footage and stills available for Petrov and Boshorov's visits to Salisbury.
Yes.
If we could go, please, in the police report to, so it's INQ 005820, page 12. And just to show you the paragraphs 35 and 36, Commander Murphy, do these paragraphs explain why there is not more CCTV footage available from Salisbury?
Yes, in essence, the CCTV that we have for both Petrov and Boshorov's movements is CCTV that was seized at the very, very earliest stage of the investigation within our Operation Wadana strategy. And at various times throughout this process, as more information became available, we were trying to widen that CCTV recovery, but at different times that CCTV has become unavailable. So that's one of the reasons why we haven't been able to expand further on some of the movements.
So as we shall see when we go through for some of their movements in Salisbury, that we have pretty good coverage, but there are other areas where one might have expected coverage, but it's not there because I think in some cases the CCTV cameras simply weren't working. But
Yes, there are several areas where
it wasn't available.
Yes.
Thank you. If we could then, so by way of very brief introduction, it's right, isn't it, that on that day, the Saturday, as I indicated in my opening, Petrov and Bosherov undertook 2 walking journeys
Yes.
from the station in the direction of Christie Miller Road.
Yes.
And those have been described in the police report and the graphics back. And these were the terms I used, I think, Journeys 1 and Journeys 2.
That's correct, yes.
So could we go, first of all, please, to INQ 005819, page 36. This is a map, Commander Murphy, of Journey 1.
Yes.
There is a video compilation that we will play in a moment. But just to get our bearings, we can see the station towards the bottom of the page.
Yes.
And the route down the access road to Fisherton Street,
Yes.
turn left towards St Paul's roundabout,
Yes.
and then up Wilton Road, turn around, come back,
Yes.
up Devizes Road,
Yes.
down between the two, back along Wilton Road.
Yes, correct.
Just help us with this. The solid blue lines, what do they indicate?
They are, in essence, a confirmed route because the CCTV allows us to see and track exact movements.
And then we see 2 other types of lines. One's a dotted blue,
Yes.
one's a yellow line. Are they different levels of inferred route?
Yes, so these are assessed routes that we believe the individuals took. The blue line is because...
So just, do you mean the blue
sorry,
line, the blue solid line or the blue dotted
my
line?
apologies. The blue dotted line
Yep.
is because it's either over a shorter distance or whether it's a longer distance. It's because we've got CCTV absolutely at the start, and there's a more direct route to the next CCTV, which they appear to have taken. Hence the blue dotted line. So an assessed route, but highly likely. And the yellow marking that you see, because there are several different routes, there's an assessed route that we say as an investigation, and that I agree as an investigation is the route we believe they took, but there is no CCTV to show that.
Yes. And then just one sort of ingredient into these assessments you haven't mentioned is, of course, the timings.
Yes.
As we will see, certain timings are known because of the CCTV cameras. would you have fed into your assessments, both for the dotted blue lines and the yellow lines, what was possible in the time, within the known timings of that particular incident?
Yes, absolutely. So in a number of different ways, actually, across all of the journeys. So I and multiple people from my team have walked these different routes on multiple occasions. So the idea being that, in essence, from the timings of cameras where they are spotted, we're able to assess the timings of the potential routes they took.
Thank you. Well, with all that in mind, could we play, please, the video for Journey 1, which is INQ 006036, picking it up 30 seconds in. Thank you.
On Saturday, the 3rd of March 2018, Ruslan Boshirov and Alexander Petrov travelled from London to Salisbury by train, leaving the station around 14:26. They walked east on South Western Road towards Fisherton Street. Upon reaching Fisherton Street, it appears that the suspects turned left and walked north, crossing St Paul's roundabout, before continuing onto Wilton Road, where they were next captured on CCTV. At 14:34, the suspects continued on Wilton Road, walking west past Salisbury Mosque. The suspects then doubled back. CCTV shows that they crossed Wilton Road and walked eastbound in the direction of St Paul's roundabout. It appears the suspects then turned left at the end of Wilton Road, taking another left turn at the roundabout into Devizes Road, where they were next picked up on CCTV at 14:39. The suspects were then lost from CCTV coverage. It appears, however, that the suspects continued walking northwest on Devizes Road, because they were next captured on CCTV a few minutes later on a connecting road, India Avenue. At 14:50, CCTV captured the suspects walking south on India Avenue towards Christie Miller Road. There were no CCTV cameras in the vicinity of Christie Miller Road at the time. The following footage depicts a reconstruction of the route the suspects are assessed to have taken after they were lost from view on India Avenue. This assessed route is based on where the suspects were next captured on CCTV footage. As will be seen, the suspects re-emerged approximately 15 minutes later, walking eastbound on Wilton Road. To get there, it appears the suspects walked from India Avenue onto Christie Miller Road before taking an alleyway at the rear of the houses there. This alleyway leads onto Highbury Avenue. There were no CCTV cameras on Highbury Avenue either, but moving southbound, the avenue leads onto Wilton Road, where multiple CCTV cameras were in operation at the time. The assessment of the suspect's route to Wilton Road is also informed by the fact that footage seized from the Shell petrol station and South Wiltshire Technical College were reviewed by police and did not show the suspects at the relevant time. Had the suspects left the vicinity of Christie Miller Road by walking south on Canadian Avenue or Montgomery Gardens instead of Highbury Avenue, they would have been captured on these cameras. At 15:06, a CCTV camera outside the Horse and Groom public house captured the suspects walking east on Wilton Road. CCTV shows the suspects continued east on Wilton Road, walking past the Salisbury Law Courts and Salisbury Medical Practice. At 15:12, the suspects were again captured by the CCTV camera outside Salisbury Mosque. This time they walked on the opposite side of the road to the camera, walking towards St Paul's roundabout, where they were briefly lost from view. The suspects headed in the direction of the train station. It appears the suspects used the Fisherton Street route across the roundabout and towards South Western Road, where they were captured on CCTV at the junction with Fisherton Street at 15:19. The suspects approached and entered the station shortly thereafter. Once inside the station, they appeared to look at the boards briefly. Petrov was captured on CCTV, having moved slightly further into the station concourse. Within a minute of arriving at the station, however, suspects left. CCTV shows they walked through the car park towards an alleyway leading onto Churchfields Road. Within a few minutes, however, the suspects had walked back across the car park towards the exit onto South Western Road.
Commander, just a few follow-up questions to that. First of all, we saw some photographs earlier of the Sunday.
Yes.
And we saw the grey rucksack that we were discussing being carried. I think it was by Petrov, the photograph we looked at. But let's just have, if we may, INQ 005819, page 37. Sorry, 37. That's odd. Yeah, thank you. We've all just looked at the footage, Commander, but just for the, there's a shot that shows their backs there in the middle there.
Yes.
Were either of them carrying the rucksack, in fact, at any point on that day?
No.
Thank you. Then if we could go over to the next page, 38, please. Commander, you've explained about the cell sighting.
Yes.
And about the fact that on this day, as in fact we'll see on the next day, that the phones were not cell sighting. Neither of the phones were cell sighting while they were in Salisbury.
Yes.
If we look at that photograph in the middle there, perhaps we could zoom in on it. One could be forgiven for thinking that, in fact, both of them on that occasion were walking along looking at their phones.
Yes, there are various times when that appears to be the case, yes.
Now, one might even infer that they were looking at their phones in order to tell them where to go. Something like that. It's a possibility.
Of course.
Just going back to what you were saying earlier, I think from what you've said, it would not be impossible for the phones at once not to be cell sighting, but to be switched on.
Yes, and be used, yes.
And be used. I don't want to take you into areas where you're not expert or you can't help us, but is it possible that the phones could be switched on, not cell sighting, but being used in a sort of navigational sense?
Well, I believe so. I'm not doing that from any kind of knowledge or experience, but except I've done exactly the same thing in Europe myself, where I've used a mapping software to provide support to me driving somewhere where I'm not connected to the network, so I don't want to spend the cost that it would take. But yes, they do at various times appear to be using their phones in that way.
Yeah. Thank you. And then Finally, if we could go back within the graphics pack to page 36, please. So back to the map we were looking at. I just want to ask you about your assessment of this journey, Commander, and obviously we'll come to your overall assessment. But for example, we saw on the video the doubling back, so that their initial walk from the roundabout up Wilton Road and then turning round, going back to the roundabout and then up Devizes Road.
Yes.
Did you reach any sort of hypotheses or assessments about that?
Yes, for a combination of reasons, both in terms of the journey that they've made and their use of devices in the way that you described. But it is my assessment that the journeys on this day, Journey 1 and Journey 2, were both for reconnaissance purposes so that they could familiarise themselves with the location of the home address in relation to other parts of Salisbury and the train station.
I mean, the doubling back on Wilton Road is at least suggestive of some plan to walk a particular route and realising once they'd taken a turn from the roundabout that they were not following the route they had intended to.
Yes, absolutely. And there's some similarity between these two journeys on the Saturday and what eventually happens on the Sunday. So yes, that's my assessment.
Just carrying on looking at the map and focusing on the yellow part of it, and you've explained what that means. Is it right that it seems very likely indeed that they walked down Highbury Avenue?
Yes.
As explained on the tape. The fact that they weren't picked up by the CCTV cameras further west, the Shell garage and the other one, it makes it very likely that that's how they got back down to Wilton Road. Yes,
absolutely. There are, as you saw in the footage actually, so when we went for the footpath in Christy Miller Road, the little path that runs along the back of Sir Guy and Julia's house as well at 47 Christy Miller Road and back out onto the road. So there are a couple of ways they could have gone at that point, but clearly the CCTV allows us to see them at those various points if they had come out that way. And as you say, if they'd gone down Canadian Avenue and Montgomery Gardens, the other two routes out of that area, we would have seen them on the other CCTV. So,
Yeah.
And then just looking, so that's Highbury Avenue coming back down to Wilton Road, but looking further up in the Christy Miller Road area, one route from India Avenue, which is where the last of those blue lines is,
yes,
to Highbury Avenue, takes one through Macklin Road, does it not?
Yes.
There's a footpath from India Avenue to Macklin Road, and then one can walk along Macklin Road
correct,
to Highbury Avenue. We will see in other plans, particularly relating to the Sunday, that there was a CCTV camera on Macklin Road. It's not there on this one. Is that because you didn't have any footage at all?
Yes, there's no relevant footage to this, so which suggests they didn't take that route, clearly.
Well, I wanted just to check. Are you saying that they couldn't have walked along Macklin Road that day because if they had, they would have been picked up?
I'll clarify that for you, but yes, I believe that is the case, but I will make sure that's the case.
So if that's right,
yes,
then although the yellow line is an assessment, there aren't that many ways in which one can get from the two blue points, and particularly between India Avenue and Highbury Avenue.
And if it's helpful, we'll make sure the camera is marked on here, sir, so that you...
Well, we'll see it in future.
We need to know whether it's working, don't we, on the day in question?
I think that's the point.
Yes.
Yeah, we will certainly see that it's marked on the maps for Sunday.
Yes.
We can see, we saw on the video in any event, and one can see that the Scripple House is marked. And of course, because it's at the end of a cul-de-sac, the route doesn't take you past that door.
Correct.
But one has a view of it from further up Christy Miller Road, where the yellow marking is.
Yes, when we saw the fly-through with the drone footage, and we marked the house at the end of the road, if you walked further than we turned right and went down the footpath that runs along the back of the houses, but if you'd gone straight on, you would have come face to face with the house. There wasn't a footpath that then led you out of there.
Yes, and just looking at this map, do you see where it says Christy Miller Road?
Yes.
It's that right turn on the R of road, isn't it, that you're describing?
Yes, that's right. The footpath then runs around the back.
And then finally, we saw the last few minutes of that film, back to the station, but only less than a minute inside the station building.
Yes.
Then a period of time sort of walking around the car park and looking at Churchfield Road.
Yes.
Is there anything you can say about that?
No, the only thing I'll say, Churchfield Road, not enough time for them to do that on this day, but Churchfield Road, if you go down the little steps from the car park, we saw them exit the car park that way. If you turn left and then right, you come in towards Queen Elizabeth Gardens and the town centre more broadly from that direction. They didn't have enough time on that this day to do that, but so it is another way out of the car park into a different route towards the town centre.
So, consistent with your theory that this was a reconnaissance?
Yes. They were checking the various routes to and from the home address and in and around the train station.
And as we shall see, and I'll suggest we come back to this after lunch, but as soon as they'd finished walking around the car park and looking at Churchfields Road, back to Fishton Street, back to St Paul's roundabout and back up towards Christie Miller Road.
Yes.
So may we leave it there and come back to the second journey after lunch?
Yes, let's do the journeys, as it were, in one go each. Is 1 o'clock going to work all right for you, Mr. O'Connor? Have you got time this afternoon? Or would you rather-
There is a fair amount left, sir. May I
In that
suggest
case,
10 to?
we'll start at 10 to. Thank you.